September the 11th, 2001. Two planes crashed into the World Trade Center in New York City. Two further planes would crash into the Pentagon and a field in Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 people were killed. As a result, George Bush declared a war of terror which would last over 20 years, targeting terrorist groups and the states that harbored them. But to understand all that, we need to begin at the start of the Bush administration. Bush was elected in 2000 after an extremely long and drawn out election which involved the Supreme Court giving the victory to Bush by a single vote. As a result, he entered office without a clear popular mandate. Still, he moved quickly to push his domestic agenda of cutting taxes, deregulation, and a push for education reform. In June, Bush signed a massive $1.35 trillion tax cut into law, one of the largest in US history, aimed at stimulating the slowing economy. He also worked to build bipartisan support for what would become No Child Left Behind Act. On foreign policy, he pulled the USA out of the Kyoto Protocol on climate change and signalled a willingness to act independently of international bodies. He also focused on China and Russia as the primary foreign concerns, with terrorism receiving far less attention. In August 2001, Bush took a 29-day vacation at his ranch in Crawford, Texas. During this time, he received daily intelligence briefings. One, dated August the 6th, now carrying the infamous title Bin Laden determined to strike in US. It warned that Al-Qaeda had active plans to hijack aircraft, but in the absence of specific details, the warning was largely dismissed. Then came the morning of September 11th, 2001, where 3,000 people died from planes crashing into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania. In the days that followed, the Bush administration declared a war on terror. This wasn't a war against a single nation. It was a sweeping and open-ended commitment to eliminate terrorist groups and any countries that harbored them. This was the start of a new era for America, for global security, and for George Bush's presidency. After 9/11, the USA was in shock, and Bush promised to bring these terrorists to justice, amidst other things. And so, in 2001, with his approval rating in the high 80s, he launched Operation Enduring Freedom, which put NATO troops into Afghanistan with one job: topple the Taliban regime. They completed that within a few weeks. Al-Qaeda was on the run. It seemed extremely easy. These soldiers would come home back to their families. Bush would be seen as a hero as he was the one that brought terrorism to justice. The job was done. Democracy was victorious, and the USA stood tall and powerful. But that was never the reality. Bin Laden escaped. The Taliban weren't defeated, they simply just retreated. War didn't end in weeks, it stretched into decades. More troops were sent, more civilians were killed. The USA would deploy troops in 2002 to fight against the Philippines Islamist groups present in the country. These troops would eventually be disbanded in 2014 after a successful 12-year mission. But Bush wasn't done. The job wasn't finished, so he decided to invade a country that had nothing to do with 9/11. Enter Iraq. Bush had previously called Iran, Iraq and North Korea the axis of evil in his 2002 State of Union address and accused them of propping up state-sponsored terrorism and pursuing weapons of mass destruction. The logic? These three wildly different regimes, one secular dictatorship, one Islamic theocracy, and one hermit communist state, were all working together to support terrorism and build weapons of mass destruction. There was absolutely no real evidence whatsoever about this, but PowerPoint slides and claims of hidden stockpiles. Yet somehow people still believed this, especially this man. And he decided to send British troops alongside the USA into Iraq. Surprise, surprise, no weapons of mass destruction were ever found. The USA invaded Iraq in March 2003, and by April 2003, the regime of Saddam Hussein had collapsed. And so, these US soldiers could come home back to their families. Bush would be seen as a hero, as he was the one that brought terrorism to justice. The job was done, democracy was victorious, and the USA stood tall and powerful. Hang on, that's Obama announcing the withdrawal of the US from Iraq in 2011. Where's Bush? What happened? Bush proclaimed mission accomplished on the USS Abraham Lincoln. It was a proud moment for the Bush administration. But the reality was far different. The fall of Saddam created a huge power vacuum in the country, and the country quickly descended into sectarian violence, and by 2006, Iraq was in the midst of a full-blown civil war, resisting US presence within the country. Insurgent groups rose up, including one that would eventually evolve into ISIS. So, it wasn't looking too good in Iraq for Bush. And in Afghanistan, the Taliban regrouped. The West found themselves in an insurgency. The Afghan government, led by Hamid Karzai, struggled with corruption and legitimacy issues. Back in the US, it was election season in 2004, and Bush was running for re-election. He ran on the idea that strong leadership was very much needed in war. But, as you can imagine, the Iraq war wasn't very popular in 2004, especially after the search for weapons of mass destruction was abandoned that same year. As the Bush administration announced, They had been mistaken. His opponent, John Kerry, criticized the administration for misleading the public on Iraq, but still, Bush was elected. The War of Terror also expanded beyond these two conflicts. The Bush administration authorized drone strikes in Pakistan, Yemen, and Somalia. The CIA established black sites that were secret prisons, where terrorist suspects were held using enhanced techniques, basically a fancy word for being tortured. Furthermore, Guantanamo Bay was established to hold enemy combatants outside the normal legal system. When Barack Obama took office in 2009, he promised two things. He promised to close down Guantanamo Bay and to end the conflict in Iraq. He did the second one relatively quickly in 2011 and withdrew all US soldiers from Iraq, which consequently created a power vacuum for ISIS to seize large portions of both Iraq and Syria. The first one, well, the USA is still working on that one. In Afghanistan, he expanded the use of drone strikes and authorized the raid that killed Osama bin Laden in 2011.
Good evening. Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children.
In 2016, Donald Trump continued the pattern of promising to end these forever wars, but in actual fact, he expanded certain aspects of them, even bringing the USA and Iraq to the brink of war. He did bring us that infamous moment, though, when the USA conducted an operation that killed the leader of ISIS.
Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead.
He did have certain successes, negotiating a deal with the Taliban to withdraw from Afghanistan, which Joe Biden, the next president, followed through with. The Afghanistan retreat was chaotic and disastrous, as it saw the Taliban retake control of the country with stunning speed, culminating in the fall of Kabul in August 2021, almost exactly 20 years after the 9/11 attacks. The global war on terror officially lasted over 20 years. It cost trillions of dollars, claimed hundreds of lives, and fundamentally reshaped American foreign policy and domestic security. Its legacy includes failed states, ongoing conflicts, expanded executive powers, and a generation of Americans who have never known their country at peace. So, what did it accomplish? Well, Al-Qaeda was severely degraded, Bin Laden and many other terrorist leaders were killed, there has been another attack on US soil on the scale of 9/11, but terrorism still exists, the Taliban still control Afghanistan, Iraq still remains unstable, and new terrorist groups are still emerging that didn't exist when the war began. The war on terror stands as one of the longest and most consequential conflicts in American history. It began with overwhelming public support in the aftermath of national tragedy. It ended with a weary withdrawal and complicated questions about what was gained and what was lost. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe and to comment down below what videos you'd like to see next.